Okay. So let's discuss just very, very briefly the difference between, I'll start out, the Shabbos Amidah and the Yom Tov Amidah. Um, the Shabbos Amidah is different. Um, is different than the every on Friday nights it's Ataki Dashta. We talk about on creation. Shabbos morning we talk about the giving of the Torah. Yismach Moshe v'matnat chalko. And at Mincha we talk Atach Abishimcha and Mikam Israel. We talk about the chosen. We talk about the Jewish people who are really looking towards the future. On Yom Tov, the Shmon Esrei is the exact same. Tabach Artanu v'Titan. Obviously, Musaf is always different, but even there contains some of the same elements. Not only that, is it's the same for Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur gets its own, so Nosach, Malchut, Zichronot, and Shofarot, whatever. Okay, that's so at Musaf. Although the Balamor says they used to daven Malchut, Zichronot, Shofarot all four tefillot of Rosh Hashanah. Imagine that. Imagine how long shul would take if we adopted that practice. But Rosh Hashanah has its own nusach. Yom Kippur has its own nusach. And the Shalosh Regalim have one nusach. So this, I think, is what Rav Soloveitchik based his opposition onto the interesting comment of the Torah Tmima. The Torah Tmima, Baruch Halevi Epstein, who passed away in the 1940s, of natural causes. I believe he was in America when he passed away. That's the son of the Aruch HaShulchan, Rav Yechiel Michal Epstein, the author of this great halachic work in the late 19th century. And the Torah Tmima, he has here, I can show you. This is his commentary on the Siddur, Baruch Shamar. He wrote, of course, a commentary on the Torah. He's an interesting figure, let's put it that way. Lots written about him and his style and some whatever. He was a character, let's put it that way. So anyway, one of his cute comments is that with the bracha we say at all the Yamim Tovim, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Yazmanim, sanctified Israel and its time, v'Yazmanim. So he says that's a printer's mistake. That's an error. You're supposed to say Mekadesh Yisrael v'Chag HaMatzot, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Chag HaShavuot, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Chag HaSukkot. But what happened is the siddur we use for Yom Tov is the same siddur. We don't use. I mean, now today, Art Scroll Court, everybody printed their own machzor, 9,000 pages just on Pesach and Sukkot. Used to be, one time there was one siddur had everything in it. Rav Moshe Feinstein actually he likes that idea. Rav Moshe Feinstein said you should not print the Shabbos and daily siddur in the same book, because the daily siddur you use every day, you're going to throw it out, 6 times as fast. The Shabbos siddur is once a week, but so those pages are nice. The daily pages get messed up, so you have to put it into Shemus. So he says it's not right. The Shabbos is really good to go, so they should print it in a different volume. No, nobody listened to him, but that's it. People do what's convenient. But now they do have that in accordance. But he says the Yom Tov siddur was all the same. So the printers put in the word Hazmanim, and then of course you were supposed to fill in the blank with what it was. That's his comment. Rav Soloveitchik didn't like that comment. He felt it was a mistake, and that it is Hazmanim is correct because the sanctity of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot is one and the same. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is a different kedusha. It's a different day, but the Shalosh Regalim are a unit. They're different mitzvot on each one of the holidays, at least on Pesach and Sukkot. But it's really one unit, and therefore it's one form. We're sanctifying time. We're sanctifying the special time between God and the Jewish people, and therefore the bracha you don't have to distinctively make Chag HaMatzot, Chag HaSukkot, and the Chag HaShavuot, which is what we do in the middle of bracha. With that sort of explains, of course, the basic difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov in general. Well, if I were to ask you what's the basic, don't tell me you can cook on Yom Tov. That's not what I mean. But what's the philosophical fundamental difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov?
Shabbos is from God and sanctified by God, and Yom Tov is sanctified by man. It has to do with the calendar. Shabbos is above the calendar.
Okay, very good. Correct. Shabbos, as I like to put it, Shabbos is the God of nature, and Yom Tov is the God of history. Shabbos predates man. The original Shabbos in the Torah, or it's at the same time as man. Man is created in Erev Shabbos, but Shabbos is not way before any Jewish people are around. So Shabbos is the fact that God is the creator of nature. That's the original reason for Shabbat. It got layered on, extra reasons got added to Shabbat. For example, the Exodus, that we left Egypt, is connected to Shabbat too, and that appears in the second set of the Seret HaDibrot, and that's because a slave has no concept of time. A slave doesn't get a day off. So we have to remember that we were slaves, don't mistreat other slaves, and have a Shabbat. But that's a second. I don't want to say it's a secondary reason, but it's the second reason historically and chronologically. The original impetus for Shabbat is that God created the world, the God of nature. Yom Tov is the God of history. Yom Tov is that God intercedes in history at specific moments. At the Exodus, at Sinai, in the desert, today. I mean, it's you can whatever. The idea is to see the hand of God in much that goes on, and that's the idea that God is a God of history, and of course the God of nature and the God of history are one in the
have both in Kiddush and in the Yisrael.
Oh, okay, we're going to get there. They both have Kiddush, but we don't. Okay, I'll get there in a moment. Thank you very much. Right. When do we say them? When do we say Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim and Zecher L'Maseh Bereshit? And you notice we do a few. It's not consistent 100% of the time. Well, thank you. So, anyways, that's and of course, when it comes to history is a partnership between God and the Jewish people. We could not leave Egypt until we put the blood on the doorpost. That was a requirement, and even though we were passive for the first 9 of the plagues, for the 10th plague, the Jewish people had to take a lamb, slaughter it, put the blood on the doorpost. We had to be active, and of course, history is a moed. A moed really means a meeting place. The Oel Moed. The Oel Moed is where God and Moshe met. So the Moadim are where God and the Jewish people meet in history. That's great historical events. And that's Moed is a combination of God and Jewish people. Like Debbie said, it's up to us to be Mekadesh to determine when Yom Tov is. That's a famous, the Gemara says that God will judge us when we tell him it's Rosh Hashanah. If we decide to push off Rosh Hashanah by an extra day, so God will judge us a day later. It's up to the Jewish people. These are the holidays that you should read. Let me just show you. I hope I didn't really take out the source, but it shouldn't take me too long to find, as I have it at the beginning here. So if you look at the end of chapter 23, which we read on the second day of Pesach, so the Torah tells us, I think it's at the end, right? No, it's right at the beginning. What am I talking about? Elam Odei Hashem, Asher Tikru Otam B'Modam. Isn't that at the beginning? Yeah. These are the festivals, or really, I think Moed time. Mikrei Kodesh, to come together in holiness. We'll see if we'll come back to what that means exactly. Asher Tikru Otam B'Modam. So you notice the word that you shall call. In other words, we have to determine when it is. Shabbos is automatic every 7th day, but we are the ones who determine Asher Tikru Otam. And notice the word Otam is missing a vav, right? You see the word Otam, it could be read Atem, which is how the rabbis read it. And an additional level of interpretation, Atem afilu mutim, Atem afilu shogim. The Gemara says you call it, even if it's wrong. The calendar doesn't have to be right. It's has to be. It can't be totally wrong. You can't decide to push off Rosh Hashanah for a whole week, but we have the right and the obligation to do all kinds of things with the calendar, which is what we do. Rosh Hashanah can never be on a Sunday, Wednesday, Friday. Pesach can never be on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's not true according to the moon, right? If the new moon, it's not like the new moon never happens on a Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday. That Rosh Hashanah can't be on a Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday for all kinds of reasons. And not for now. We manipulate the calendar, and it's okay. And that's why, of course, Rabbi Gamliel insisted on our calendar. I've said it 100 times. I don't know here as much, but thank God, when Rabbi Gamliel embarrassed, he publicly humiliated Rabbi Yeshua. He made Rabbi Yeshua come on the day that he thought was Yom Kippur. The Mishnah describes the case where Rabbi Yeshua, there was a debate when Rosh Chodesh was, and it seemed that Rabbi Yeshua was correct. Rosh Chodesh should be delayed by one day. But Rabbi Gamliel, who was the head of the Nasi, he determined, no, Rosh Hashanah is going to be the day earlier. We're going to accept the testimony of the witnesses, although it appears they made a mistake. And Rabbi Gamliel understood that if Rabbi Yeshua is going to observe Yom Kippur a day later, half the people will observe Yom Kippur on Tuesday, and half the people on Wednesday. We're finished. That's the end of the Jewish people. So Rabbi Gamliel orders Rabbi Yeshua to come with his stick to break Yom Kippur. It's not so nice. It's a violation of his religious rights and lack of pluralism and all those other things that we hold so dear in the Western world. And nonetheless, and it wasn't so right. It was a little bit harsh, but it was there was no choice. There was no choice. Maybe he could have done it in a nicer way. When he came, he hugged him and he kissed him, and that saved the Jewish people. Without that, would be finished. Could not exist as one people with two separate calendars. It doesn't matter. That's what it doesn't. So Rabbi Gamliel was wrong. Who cares? We determine when Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah and Pesach and Sukkot is. That's up to us. It's a very powerful idea. That is the Jewish people who determine Yom Tov. It's God and Jewish people in history. It's not up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. With that, we'll go through one amazing. I don't. Has anybody seen? It's one of the first things I learned when I got to Israel in yeshiva. The Sefer Mitzvah of the Rambam. So the Rambam wrote the Sefer HaMitzvah. Well, why did he write Sefer HaMitzvah?
To use as a checklist for the Mission Torah.
Yeah, that was his introduction to the Mission Torah. The Mission Torah is a summary of all of Jewish law. So presumably Jewish law is based on 630 mitzvot, although that's quite a controversial claim. Although everybody today knows there's 630 mitzvot. And the time of the Rishonim, the Ramban wasn't sure. Many people weren't sure there's 630 mitzvot. Some obscure Gemara at the end of Makkah, some non-legal drasha that doesn't really fit 100% to have 630 mitzvot, but as we all know, that has become widely accepted. The Talmud was not too concerned about. Talmud never lists them, and we don't have an agreed upon list. There's no agreed upon list of 630 mitzvot, and basically you have to do contortions to do 630 mitzvot. There are 5 million mitzvot. Well, wait a minute, 630 mitzvot. There, just in Shabbos alone, there are 500 mitzvot. So how do you get everything to 613? So that they do, like I say, contortions. So the Rambam has to give you 14 principles. This doesn't count. That doesn't count. This doesn't count. 98% of the mitzvot don't count as the arguments. And we spoke about that in the summer when I was in Portugal and we were doing our shir a later time in the day. So we did on Sefer HaMitzvot. But anyways, so the Rambam 630 mitzvot, he's going to explain that. Yes, so he has to tell you what the 613 mitzvot are. So that's in Sefer Mitzvot. And then in the Mission Torah, he explains those 613 mitzvot. So if we take a look at mitzvah 153, it's a little bit mind-boggling. It's mind-blowing. I don't know what the word is exactly. Let's take a look. The Rambam's talking about the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, the mitzvah to sanctify the new moon. And the Rambam says here, unfortunately, it's not in English. Safari doesn't have it in English, but I'll just do a little bit and I'll translate. V'kan shorish gadol misharshei hamunah. The Rambam says now I'm going to tell you a fundamental principle of our faith. Shorish gadol, a big root in the roots of our faith. Lo yudo v'lo yitbono bimkomo elamisha dato amuka. Only those who have depth analysis. Not everybody can understand it just like that. You have to think about it. It's in depth. V'zeh, and here it is. Zeh sheyetonu hayom b'chutz la'aretz. We who live outside of Israel, in the diaspora. The Rambam lived in Egypt. I don't know if probably when he wrote this, he lived in Morocco. I think he wrote this in Fez, but it doesn't matter. He wasn't in Israel. The Chutz La'aretz, and most Jews weren't. Monim b'mlacha they worship within brim shezeh Yom Rosh Chodesh. Today is Rosh Chodesh. Today is Yom Tov. That's not because we did the calendar. Lo mivnei cheshbonon niku Yom Tov b'shum panim. Has nothing to do with us. Al mivnei beitin hagadol sheberetz, because in the 4th century, the court in Israel determined the calendar for all time. Zeh Yom Rosh Chodesh o Yom Tov. And because they said today is Rosh Chodesh Yom Tov, that's what we do. Right? Elam Odei quotes a pasuk asher otam. Notice he puts in the vav here, but okay. Okay, so he says like this. Okay, so you explain why it has to be done in Israel, fine. But and understand this. But and I'm going to give you I'm going to explain it further. If we were to imagine that Bnei Israel, so that there be no Jews living in Israel. When the Ramban comes to Israel in 1267, he cannot find dominion in Jerusalem. So it's not so hard to imagine that there be zero Jews living in the land of Israel. God forbid that this should happen, but let's imagine what happened. God promised that won't happen. He didn't exactly promise that. He promised that we won't be wiped out. So the Rambam says having no Jews in Israel is like being wiped out. No. That's interesting. Our calendar would be meaningless. It will be of zero help to us. Under no circumstances. Because we have no right. The mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people, the mitzvah to sanctify the new moon and to get ready for the Exodus, that has to be done in the land of Israel. And with Kimi Tzion Tetzei Torah, it's the whole foundation of our faith is to set up a calendar. All of Judaism works on the calendar. That must come out of Zion. Okay, so it goes on. He says basically what he says. Okay, he's explaining all the derivation that we can only do it in Israel. Here they did translate it. Oh, they did have somebody. I apologize. Okay, I didn't see this. But anyways, understand this. If you were to assume Jewish residents disappeared from the land of Israel, there'd be no court. In such a case, the calculate would surely not help. Basically, what the Rambam says, you couldn't celebrate Yom Tov. If there are no Jews in Israel, you cannot celebrate Pesach in Chutz La'aretz. That's a pretty wild idea. Anyways, that's Yom Tov is focused on Israel, and we know the mitzvah, of course, is Aliyah L'Regel, the mitzvah to go to Yerushalayim 3 times a year. I don't think it was ever widely observed. But that's besides the point. That I don't think you ever had a situation where everybody left their home and wherever went to Israel. But in theory, one is supposed to go to Israel 3 times a year. By the way, halakhically, it's interesting. Now I'll say sort of almost the opposite. Halakhically, that mitzvah doesn't apply if you live in Chutz La'aretz. In other words, the obligation to go to Jerusalem is if you're living in Israel, you have to go to Jerusalem. You don't have to fly or take your camel from Babylonia to Israel to go, and that Tosfot already points out. That's just an interesting. I don't know what it means, but I mean it's a mitzvah for those who live in Israel to come to Jerusalem. It's a mitzvah to live in Israel, but you don't have to specifically go to Israel from America. You're allowed to go on a Pesach program in Florida and Arizona and Hawaii and Italy and where else are they programs in Greece? And I'm sure I'm missing some of the nice Pesach programs. Okay. Anyways, okay. So let's get now into the beginning, at least, of the Yom Tov Amidah. So he said it's the same Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. Okay. You chose us from all the nations. The first 3 chapters, brachot, that's what we're doing now in a regular share that we'll continue next week. But now we start instead of atachonein, right? We instead of the 13 petitions we make for God, Shabbat and Yom Tov have 7 brachot, right? We only have 1 bracha in the middle, and as does Yom Kippur, the Kedushat Hayom, the sanctity of the day is 1 bracha. Only on Yom Kippur do we have 9 brachot in the Muslim. That's very strange because of Chana. Chana davened, invoke God's name 9 times. So and because our prayers are modeled after Chana, so we do 9 prayers on Rosh Hashanah, but 9 brachot. But we do only 7 on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Fine. 7, of course, is a special number when on Shabbos. So God chose us from all the nations. Ahavta otanu v'ratzita banu. He loved us. Ahavta otanu. What does v'ratzita banu mean? What does the word v'ratzita banu mean? Nobody knows. Okay.
Here it is translated as you favored us.
Yeah. Well, so I looked up the Koran the RCA and the R scroll answer just they favored us. Ratzita banu, rotzeh banu, you like us. I find that I don't know a sort of interesting translation. I don't exactly even. And what does that mean? How's that different from atabachartanu or haptotanu? Obviously, if you loved us, you favored us. I don't know exactly. The
Well,
hearse,
that's like the phrase Tehillah Retzonim Refi.
right? It should be in. We should find favor in you. Our
Right.
worship find favor. Right. Ratzita. Okay. Obviously they're different. Okay, that's how they translated it. Ritsui is the like when we bring a korban is for ritsui, so we should find favor in the eyes of God. There clearly is that idea. I don't know if this means anything different, but in the Hersitter, I noticed they translate he takes pleasure in us. It's a little bit different than he favors us. God takes pleasure in us. He enjoys us. We'll have to figure out what that means. Okay, now when did God choose us or did we choose God? That wasn't a hard question. I think that was
Both.
yeah, both. Okay. What does that? What do you mean both?
Well, Avram chose God, but God chose Moshe. So it's both.
Avram chose God. Avram really. Where does it say in the Chumash that Avram
Well,
chose?
it doesn't say in the Chumash, but we have a tradition that he of all the other, all the people then found God.
Yeah, so I mean, of course, there is some truth to that, obviously, but I'm not sure. Okay, I preferred the Rabbi Leag approach. I first heard this from Rabbi Leag many years ago. That really, I'll start with. I think I told this story once. Tzvi Grummet, who wrote a fantastic book on Bereshit. He teaches in Israel now. He's now living in Israel. Tanakh. So he wrote the Koran book on Bereshit. So he writes in his introduction that he was once asked in a shul in the States to give a course, a year-long course on Bereshit. So the rabbi told him, of course, you're going to start at chapter 12. Like, what are you going to waste your time on the first 11 chapters in the Chumash? So, of course, he refused it. Wait a minute, I can't teach that. I mean, that statement to me is actually heresy. I mean, I don't know if it's like technically heresy, but I can't imagine. Basically, God put the first 11 chapters in the Torah, and you go to some and say, no, who cares about that stupid stuff? Like, who cares about the children from Adam to Noah and Lemach had 2 wives? I don't care and Noah and the flood. What does that have to? And the 70 nations. What do I care? Let's start where it matters by Abraham. Wow. And what God, so you're editing out God's 11 chapters in the Chumash. The one word you change. Oh my God. So why are the first 11 chapters in the Chumash? I mean, why is it important to know about Lemach? Like, who cares? Taka, who does care? Why is it important? Did I stump everybody? No, that's you ever Bereshit no. So it's Parsha Bereshit nobody pays attention to because it's right after Simchas Torah, and there's still, especially when Yom Tov's on a Thursday, Friday, who has time to read, and it's so long in creation, and then we're very good. What do you mean the world's created in 6 days? It's 15 billion years old. So Bereshit, okay. But Noah, no, what about? And then we talk about Noah. He's not such a tzaddik, compared to Abraham. But Torah Tav, only what happened? Okay, then we get into Torah by Parshat Lech Lecha. We're into it already. So
it's important to show the failures that existed before
the first 11 chapters are the reason for chapter 12. The first 11 chapters explains why God chose to have Jewish people. In God's original plan, this is how Rabbi Leag explains it. I know it's not, I don't think Rashi, I think Rashi is a little bit different, although he doesn't say it explicitly, but I think it really is a beautiful explanation. The first 11 chapters tells you why God had to have a special nation. God wanted to make a relationship with all of mankind. All of man is created to tell Elohim. And God wasn't going to have a Jewish people. He created man. Man was going to be God's partner. But it didn't work. It didn't work. And man sinned, and God waited for 10 generations, and they're bad and worse and worse. Okay, we're going to Hashem. So God says, okay, I made mistake. Man, I gave man free choice. I'm a little sorry. I mean, the Psukim are theologically very difficult for people who grew up in the traditional yeshiva education, where, what do you mean? God was sorry, he changed his mind. That doesn't sound like things we talk about God, but that's what the verses in the Chumash do say. That's what it says in the Chumash. God was sorry, made man, but Noach saved us all. But Noach matzachem b'nei Hashem, and therefore God said, "Okay, great, Noach's going to be the savior of the world." And you know what? It was a little bit better. But it wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough. And Noah gets drunk and all the problems with his children. And so God says, you know what? I need to find somebody else. So I can't work with everybody. I can't change the whole team. I just got to change the management, got to change the senior management, and they'll change the whole team. So I'm going to look around who's the best senior manager, who's the best person to put as the CEO of the moral rules that God wants them. That's Avram. God found Avram. And it's not so much that Avram found God, it's God found Abraham. Yes, so we have all these Midrashim, Avram, of course. Now, why did God choose Avram? Because Avram was exploring, Avram was looking for God. First, he was doing idol worship, as we explained last week. We said in Dakara, he was exploring God, and he was, it took him a while until he came across the true God. The Sfat Emet has really a cool comment. He does say that God, Avram was the only one. How come Avram went to Israel? Nobody else did. God called out whoever wants to go. I'm going to make a special relation to whoever goes to the land of Israel. Avram was the only one who sort of heard the voice of God, so to speak. But when we say Ateba Kartan, we call Amin, we're emphasizing God's role. We're not emphasizing Avram's role. God chose us because God needed a nation to carry out his mission. And that mission, what's the mission of the Jewish people, at least from the time of Avram? What's the mission of the Jewish people?
Do tzedek u'mishpat.
Correct. Let me just find it here. Let me do right here. Just so we can see it. So, see, I'm not making this up, Bereshit, what is it? Bereshit 18.
Yitzavet banav acharav.
Yeah. Why didn't it come up here? Bereshit 18. Safaria. I don't know. Why is the Sussah not coming out? What's going on here? Okay, we'll go here. Okay. Tanakh, Genesis 18:19. It's right when God is about to destroy Sodom, right? So God is, he says, I'm going to hide from Abraham. He's going to be a great teacher, right? Because I know he's going to teach his children to follow the way of God, to do tzedakah mishpat. That's why I want to communicate with Abraham. That's why I want to have a special relationship. God says, am I going to hide from Abraham? No, Abraham is my partner. And therefore, I have to tell him he's going to be the leader of this great nation. So I better let him know that I want to wipe out the city of Sodom. And so he can argue with me, basically, right? It's to say, and because I know what will happen, that he will teach Shamru Derek Hashem. What's the path of God? To do tzedakah umishpat. That's what God wants from us. To do tzedakah, asot tzedakah. That's in Micha, no? The three things that God asked for. It's abat chesed and mishpat and atznei lechadim elokecha. But this is why we were chosen. But it's very interesting. Basically, the emphasis on the Yom Tov Amidah is very much not so much that we chose God, but God chose us. Why did he choose us? Because he loves us. Yeah, really? Is that why? Or is that one thing or two things? He chose us, period. And he chose us, B, he loves us. Or no, he chose us because he loves us. Anybody? Any thoughts on that? Right? So it looks like, I don't know if I'm reading it, it sounds like two separate things. Why? There's no vav. You notice the Romam Tanum Mikol there's no and. I don't know if that's so significant, but God chose us and he loved us. Do everything. If I'm correct that God chose us because he needed somebody to carry out his mission, it wasn't so much that Abraham found God. God found Abraham. He found a good candidate, but he found Abraham, so he didn't love him yet. In other words, God's has to look around. It's going to take a while till he's going to love him. Eventually it's going to come up. In other words, I think you can distinguish between God are being chosen and God's love for us. Of course, we say both, but that perhaps comes later. The commentaries on the Siddur basically link this phrase to a pasuk in Dvarim. Anybody want to guess what the pasuk in Dvarim is? I didn't think so. Okay, let's go. Oh, you know what? That's the one I erased because I made a mistake. Okay, let's go here. Sorry, it'll take me.
Hashem picked us from all the nations. No other God picked a nation out from all the other nations.
Sort of. Let's here. Let's take a look here. Very interesting. We'll start from the beginning of the parak. When God will bring you into this land, the Kriti, Girgas, Yamor, Kanani, Brizi, we see the 7 nations in Israel, and God you'll defeat them in battle. Lo Tuchanein. It's an interesting, and not for now, an interesting prohibition. You're not supposed to be so nice to the 7 nation. Whatever that means. It's important, but we don't have time now for that. Lo titchatein bam. Do not marry them. This is the Torah's prohibition of intermarriage, which, by the way, according to some commentators, I know this will be a radical idea. Certain commentaries explain that the biblical prohibition of intermarriage is only for people of the 7 nations, because clearly that's the context of the Chumash. That we're going to enter the land, do not marry the people of the 7 nations. And I think the Torah, even the great halakhic codifier, the Torah, even says it's only a rabbinic prohibition to intermarry. We don't view mitzvot only on a technical level. Obviously, on a social level, intermarriage is really, really high up there. It's one of the big no-nos because it generally marks the end of that person's tie to the Jewish people. Although today that's less true. Did I mention it here? I don't know if I mentioned it here last week or somewhere else, that Rav Shachter told us the most important people to invite to your Seder are your intermarried relatives. Because today intermarriage is a lot different than it once was, and people don't intermarriage to reject Judaism. There's marriage because we live in the Western world and you fall in love, so you marry over love. Well, why should religion get in the way? That's such an archaic idea. Love. Why should religion cause people not to love each other, not to be together? It's not such a bad argument. If not for the fact that what the Torah says, and not for we have Torah, that argument makes a little bit of sense, and therefore our attitudes are very different. Anyways, why am I telling you all this? Because this is the source. Why can't you intermarry? So because you intermarry, you won't observe all the mitzvot. You're going to worship other gods. Yeah, that won't be so great. And you have to destroy their idols. Okay, and then the Torah says, Ki am kadoshu, you're a special nation. Because you have chosen us. The Yatlo Am Skula, to be a special nation, an expression we also have by Har Sinai. Mikol Amim, God chose us from all the nations that are on the face of the earth. Again, it's God chose us. We didn't choose God. Lo mi ruvka mikol amim. I didn't choose you because you were numerous people. Now, the question is this referring to Abraham or to Har Sinai? Right? Ve'ivkar b'chem ketem ma'at. Jewish people are very small. We're 13 million people. Because God loves you. And he made a promise to our forefathers. It's very interesting. Why does God have to give 2 reasons? We know in Russia, whenever there are 2 reasons, one reason isn't good enough. Right? So it could be that's also true here. I don't know. But the fact that God loves us is very nice. But if we do the Chet Ego, maybe God has to, start with another nation. Just because you love somebody doesn't mean that person is going to be the person who carries on your legacy. Sometimes parents recognize some children, they love children, but we're not going to have that children come in the business. It'll ruin the business love deal. So it's interesting. God loves us. That's why he chose us. But it's not just he loved us. God made a promise to our forefathers. And he took us out of Egypt, from Biyad Paro, Melech Mitzrayim. Here we go. There we're into Pesach again. So that's why God here already. This is later. God loves us and He chose us. So that's why. That's what most of the commentators explain. Is referring to these Sukkim and Dvarim, which is about when we're going to enter the land of Israel. We dare not intermarry. because to be a holy nation, and that comes next, V'kidashtanu b'mitzvotecha, and you sanctified. So you have all the key words in those verses. God has sanctified us through his mitzvot. By the way, what does it mean Rome Tanami call halashonot? What does that mean? Rome Tanami call halashonot. He raised us, no the Romains, to make higher. What does it mean call halashonot? That talking about Hebrew on the Jewish people. He made Hebrew into a special language. That could very well be. Hebrew is a very beautiful language. Lashon HaKodesh. We call Hebrew Lashon HaKodesh because of the way the words work, And God created the world through speaking Hebrew. By the way, when it says in Pirkei Avot, you should be as careful with a mitzvah kala like a mitzvah chamura. Even though there are more important mitzvot and less important mitzvot, otherwise you don't say be as careful with the light mitzvah and the heavy mitzvah. There are mitzvot that are more important. Eating the korban pesach is more important than putting on tzitzis. That's just the way it is, Many mitzvot, committing adultery is a lot worse than not eating kosher. Being dishonest in business is worse than eating pork. I mean, there's a hierarchy to our mitzvot. Nonetheless, we should try to observe all of them. So our attitude should be as careful in a mitzvah kala, a light mitzvah. I don't know if you're trying light or easy, whatever. It could be both. Kibbachamur, like having mitzvah. So the Rambam says he gives two examples. By the way, it's a light mitzvah. What's a mitzvah kala? It's not. In other words, it's not so important, relatively speaking. It's lesser importance, but it's you should still be careful as if it's really important. What are the two mitzvot the Rambam gives? Anybody? To speak Hebrew. Wow. To speak Hebrew, you got to go to Flatbush Yeshiva or some Ivrit school, not where I think like we talked last week. Very few schools today doing Ivrit. And the second one is Simchat HaRegel. Very interesting to be joyous on the festival. Very interesting. That's from here. Those are the two mitzvot in Pirush HaMishnayos in Pirkei Avot. Simchat HaRegel and to speak Hebrew. Anyways, we can interpret like the Lashon Hebrew. God elevated, made it a special language for the world. And the way Hebrew words play in together, sometimes the same word means the opposite. You know that in Hebrew. And it's beautiful because, the whole Torah is full of opposites. Right? The Torah contradicts itself all the time. That's the 13th principle of Ramangula. Life is full of contradiction. So we often have Hebrew words. Let me think of an example offhand. There are many of them. Pen Yosef, right? And Mamad Harsina, what does it mean to add or to end? They're opposites, right? That's an end or it can't be added to. Well, so that's by Mamad Harsina. But Kol Yosef, the voice, the shofar, never ended or never stopped. You have a lot of examples. I can't think of them offhand. But Hebrew is a very special language. The Kiddushah mitzvotecha made us holy through his mitzvot, and the Keiraftanu malkeinu lavodotecha. He brought us close to his service. What does that mean? So the commentaries explain. He brought us to Har Sinai. The Keiraftanu malkeinu, where we're mamlachet kohanim v'goy am kadosh, right? He brought us to service him lavodotecha. V'shimcha hagadol v'kadosh aleinu karata. What does that mean? And his great name is great, Hagadol, and holy name, Aleinu Karata. What does that expression mean? Who's saying God's name? Right? It's this paragraph is about God. Atabakartano, you God, you chose it from all the nations. You favored us, to say Ratzita Banu, right? You take pleasure in us, whatever. You raised us above all the other people who speak all the other foreign languages, the 70 languages from Noah, that we don't want. Abraham is the response, right? Abraham is chosen right after the world is divided into 70 nations. That's, of course, the point. The world, okay, God tried with everybody, one nation. Tower of Babel was the straw that broke the camel's back. The Torah then describes the 70 descendants of Noah. And then immediately we start with Abraham. And So we were all the other nations. There's 70 and 1, right? That's on Sukkot. We bring the 70 korbanot, the 70 parim for the nations of the world, and then on Shmini Atzeret we bring just one par because that's the uniqueness of the Jewish people. There's 70 plus 1. Just by the way, our Sanhedrin, it's very interesting. The Sanhedrin is also 70 plus 1, right? There's 70 members in the Sanhedrin, then there's plus 1, then there's the head of the Sanhedrin. Because you can't have a 35-35 vote. You always have to have an odd number of people on a Jewish court. And God, you sanctified us through your mitzvot. You brought us close to worship you. Now hold on, what comes first? That God brought us to Har Sinai or the mitzvot? Which is first? I would have thought comes is before. You brought us to Mount Sinai, and then you sanctified us by mitzvot. But we say the opposite. You sanctified us to mitzvot, and then you brought us to Mount Sinai.
Because we got a few before.
Right. So that's probably we got a few before. Like what?
What if
Shabbos we got before.
What if Lavodatecha is not Har Sinai, but what if it's the temple?
Could be. Could very well be. And that would tie in very well because that's the place where God's name is known. All the commentaries I looked at, I think pretty much all of them said it's Har Sinai, but I think that could very well be. Avoda, of course, means in the Beit Hamikdash, avoda is korbanot, and that would fit in very well. Thank you for that. I think I don't know. I have to look more. And actually, I'm surprised now. Why don't any of the commentaries say? I mean, I look at so many, but they said it. But that's good. But also, we got certain mitzvot before Har Sinai. Like we got mitzvot in Bris Milah. We got that in Egypt. We got a lot of the mitzvot. Kiddush HaKodesh, setting up the calendar. There are a lot of mitzvot given.
Kibbut Avayim, I think they said.
Yeah. So it's Dinim, Shabbos, and there's
Paraduma. I think they use
Paraduma. Some say Paraduma. Sham lo chok umishpat. So there's one that's a mishpat, there's one that's a chok, and there's one that's a chok mishpat. In other words, one of the laws makes a lot of sense. It's so that's our dinim, our civil laws. You steal, you got to pay back. That's mishpat. Then you have chok. Then you have the chok is paraduma. If you say it's paraduma, but hold on, there's Shabbos. I now, and some say that
not to eat the sinew.
There's a machlokas about 3 or 4.
Right, no, because then
one place lists one thing and one place lists
right, different midrashim. Right, so I have to figure what's the chok umishpat was kibbut aveim. Kibbut aveim is a chok. What does it mean? It's a chok and a mishpat. Makes sense. You got to honor your parents. A chok means it's sort of irrational, or we've never come up with it on our own. So that's for sure paraduma, and the mishpat civil law for sure is a mishpat. Kibbut aveim, it's all you think it's a mishpat. On the other hand, no. Even if you're a mamzer, you got to honor your parents. Even if your parents are wicked, you got to honor your parents. So there's a chok element. There's a certain irrational, if you want to call it, element that in honoring parents, they brought you into this world. You have to honor them no matter what the circumstances are. Anyway, but that's so we were given mitzvot before Matan Torah. Okay, but let's go back. And you, God, you called your name upon us. So it's a little bit hard to figure out what that means exactly. So I think what most of the commentaries, what they all pretty much, a lot of them begin to say is that God put his name on the Jewish people. What is the name of the Jewish people? Yisrael. That our name incorporates God. That's how V'shimcha hagadol aleinu karata. When you called out to our name, lo yikra Yaakov or whatever, lo shimcha Yaakov im Yisrael, your name is Yisrael, which of course means to be honest. God is honest. Yashar El. God is a straight God, right? Yisrael, and there's other meanings too. But though God's name was put upon us, that's what we're thanking God. So we represent God's name. That's a very high responsibility. That's why. How does the laning always begin on Yom Tov? We did it on Wednesday, right? The Yom Tov, right? God's name, that's basically a Kiddush Hashem, and a Chilul Hashem. Why? That's why it's so important. You know, the first mitzvah that the Rambam talks about is Kiddush Hashem. His first 4 chapters, he talked about metaphysics, creation of the world. That's the stuff the rabbis burnt. You know, they didn't like that stuff. Where the Rambam starts all these things I don't understand it either. It's about whatever physics and this or then in chapter 5, the Rambam begins really the laws of the Torah, and he starts with Kol Yisrael Mitzuvim. I remember the exact language. The entire house of Israel. It's like a beautiful. Everybody, men, women, children, are commanded on the mitzvah to sanctify God's name. That's the first mitzvah. How do we do? I'll just show quickly. The laning starts, and we always read on every Yom Tov. We read at some point. We read chapter 23 in Vayikra, which is the main part of the Yom Tov of the Yom Tovim, right? Which of course, Elam Moadei Hashem. That's what I showed before. Atem. You call the holidays, right? It should start here. These are the holidays. This is where it should start. That makes sense. And then we talk about Shabbos, and then we talk about Pesach, and etc. That's not what we do. We start Bishor Ochesav Ki Valed. If you have a sheep, an ox is born, so you cannot bring it to a korban until it's 1 week old. You cannot slaughter a mother and its child, an animal, on the same day, right? There's certain interesting halachas in your day about this, that 4 times a year you have to be very concerned. You have to know, because there's so many animals, Erev Pesach, so many animals are being slaughtered. You have to be careful. But there's a lot. It's mean. That's considered something mean to wipe out a mother and a child on the same day, even though it's only an animal. And then it talks about bringing a korban todah to say thank you to God. You have to eat it that day. That's to say thanks to God, the Yom Tovim, keep our mitzvah, and then don't desecrate God's name. It's like the introduction. We do this every Yom Tov. Now, it's fascinating that Kiddush Hashem and Chilul Hashem in the Torah are put in the context of how we treat animals. Like it's, I don't know, I find that pretty wild. God took you out of Egypt. You have to be our God, and He's our God. So we partner with God. God has put His name upon us, so we're responsible to make sure that name isn't desecrated and to make sure we sanctify that name. And it's all you have to just read the verses in the Torah and actually pay attention to them, like as what the words of the Torah say. Then you can add Rashi later. But first, just read the words of the Torah. Why did it's nothing to do with Yom Tov on first glance. Torah could have started that we have 44 verses, plenty for 5 aliyahs. All you need is 5 aliyahs for these 44 verses. No problem to get it in. But our sages said, no, we're going to start the Yom Tov laning, because Yom Tov is all about Kiddush Hashem and Chilul Hashem. It's all about God's name being called upon us. That's how we begin every Atabachartana, we call Amim. Abtotanu, B'Shimcha Gadol V'Kadosh, Aleinu Karata. Okay. Also means, of course, we have to God put His name upon us, and we have to call out in God's name. Like Rabbi Hashem, that's what Avram did. We call out in God's name. We want to know God's name. Like Rabbi Hashem, God Himself called out on His own name. Hashem, Arachum V'Chanun Erech. Right. So we sing that on Yom Tov. By the way, thank God that the Canadian American tunes are different. Whenever I'm in the States for Yom Tov, I can't take it. It's such a boring tune, the Yud Gimel Midah. They do it like in minor key. I had to go Hashem, Arachum V'Chanun Erech Apayim. Right? Isn't that how they do it in America? In Canada, it's so upbeat. Hashem, Arachum V'Chanun Erech Apayim. V'Rav Chesed V'Yemet Notzer Chesed La'alafim Nosei Avon V'Pesha V'Chata. It's so more upbeat. Wow. Okay. Anyways, come to Canada. Okay. Anyways, because Israel also does it the American way. I don't know, but it's so much nicer. It's really, when you're 100 people singing in the major, I think it's major versus minor. It's just instead of going down. Okay. Anyways, where did that come from? That comes by Rabbi Hashem, by Yavor Hashem Apanav, that we called out, or the Gemara interprets it in a very audacious way, that God Himself called out, and He told Moshe. God called out, and He called them the 13 principles of mercy. Whenever the Jewish people sin, this is the way for sinning. Why do we say it on Yom Tov? I get it on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, God forgave us. Why do we say the 13 Midah on Yom Tov?
Maybe when everybody's together in the Beis Hamikdash, it's an appropriate time.
Okay, I don't know if they said in the Beit Hamikdash. I don't know that they had like a dummy.
Okay.
Well, we do say in Shemona Esrei, we do say "Umipnei chataenu galinu me'artzenu."
Right.
So there is some reference to, the issue of our needing
Right,
some level
so-
of repentance.
Okay, good. I think I that's for sure. I think the because the Yamim Tovim are also Yom Hadin. But Arba Prakima Olam Nidon, right? We think of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur as the Yom Hadin, right? But the second Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah, the first Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah, Arba Rosh Hashanah, there are 4 new years of the year. That's not for now. And the second Mishnah, Arba Prakim Olam Nidon, the world is judged 4 times. The Pesach al Pesach for the wheat, that's why we bring the Korban Omer, the barley offering. Be'atzeret, that's the Mishnah's name for Shavuot, al Peirot Ilan, on the fruit of the tree, that's why we bring the Bikurim. And on Pesach, Ubechag Nidon, then it says, Uberosh Hashanah Kol Ba'ei Olam Ovrim Lefanav, Shanamar HaYotzer Yachal Libam Avinu Kol Masem. The Mishnah expands, Kol Ba'ei Olam. It's not a Jewish thing, Kol Ba'ei Olam. Every human being goes before God. Ubechag Nidonim Alamayim. And on Sukkot, we're judged for the water. That's why we have the mitzvah of Nisuach HaMayim, the Beit HaMikdash, and Tefillah Keshem. So, and that's why I spoke about this 2 years ago, actually. That's the minhag to say Yisker. The original minhag is only to say Yisker and Yom Kippur, but then it got expanded. I don't think they say it in the Sephardic world, I think, but in the Ashkenazic world, it got expanded into the Shalosh Regalim, because the Yiskers, the idea is to do tshuva. That's why we say Yisker. Not so much, right? You're not saying Yisker and Yom Tov is a problem. It's a happy time. Well, why are you saying something sad? So it's not meant to be sad. It's meant to motivate us to do tshuva. As the Gemara says, if a person's going to sin, the way to stop, the best way to stop, to think of Yom HaMitah, I think we're all going to die. And that should encourage us a little bit to be better. So the Yamim Tovim are also a mini Yom Hadin. It's the Yom Hadin for the natural world. The Yom Hadin for people is Rosh Hashanah. So therefore, I assume that's why we had a Shema Shema Rachum Bechana on Yom Kippur. It's like all over the place in the Slichas. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we say it there. Why we don't say it on Shabbos, I don't know. I don't have a good answer. I have to look. I didn't check that out now, right? Why when Yom Tov is on Shabbos, but it's not a day of judgment when Yom Tov. I don't think that's true. Pesach Nidonim al Atzvua, whether it's Shabbos or not. I don't exactly know. Maybe. I mean, it's only a minhag. I don't know. I have to check. I didn't look into that. Why I forget why we don't say it on Shabbos.
Maybe because we don't say bakashot on Shabbos, so it's
right. So you want to say this like a bakasha and Shabbos, so
you don't bring a somber tone into Shabbos. Shabbos kulo.
Maybe that's why the Americans sing it in a somber tone. In Canada, we sing it in the upbeat tune because God is forgiving us. It's so beautiful. No, is this something negative or positive? It's so negative. God is judging us, not to go. No, but in Canada, we're very confident. So God is forgiving us. I don't know. I say that as a joke off the top of my head, but I'm not sure it's a joke because
when Yom Kippur
represent the mood. Tunes must represent the mood. That's a big problem. We have to. Young Israel killed because of it. We've discussed it.
When Yom Kippur. When Yom Kippur occurs on Shabbat, don't we still say it?
No. Yes, I forget. Avinu Yom Kippur and Shabbat, we may say that.
Avinu Malkeinu is only by Ne'ilah then.
Right. Avinu Malkeinu, but Avinu Malkeinu is a later addition. I do think Yom Kippur and Shabbat now, I don't remember. Do we say it? I bet you it's a machloket. I bet you it depends. I don't remember now offhand.
But it's certainly in the prayers.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I'm saying
in the prayers many times,
100%, because that's where it really counts. Saying it by Torah reading is like, we throw it in, like it's not real. Like by the prayers, we're going to say it even on Shabbos, but to say it also, so I think so. We say it on Yom Tov. There's sort of an allusion, I think, to that's also Yom Hadin, but we don't really put it. That's not the focus on Yom Tov, right? You go to Shul on Yom Tov, you get no indication. How was the last time your rabbi got up and said today's a Yom Hadin? That's not how we talk about Yom Tov. That's not in our Siddur, but it's in the Mishnah. It's there. And that's why the korbanot, those special korbanot, were established at that time of year, because it is a Yom Adin. But somehow we don't focus on that. So I guess our sitter wanted to allude to it. So they alluded to it. They threw it in when we take out by Chotzat HaTorah. Oh, I just found that interesting. Okay, it's getting late. I was hoping to do Batite Lanu, the paragraph of Batite Lanu, but I think we'll have to wait. I was gonna why we say Rabba on Shabbos, but okay. Anyway, just as one paragraph. So let's just quickly review what we did. Shabbat is the god of nature. Yom Tov is the god of history. Shabbat predates the Jewish people for sure, and kind of predates man. Part of God's original plan, and of course, history is the a moed means a meeting place, like the Oel Moed, and the Moedim are the meeting between God and the Jewish people at specific moments in history. But the Jewish people have to act. We cannot rely on God, unlike Shabbos. Shabbos then eventually gets this added addition of the Exodus. Also, I'll come back, Debbie, to your point that I didn't come back to yet. And okay, and then we discussed how the Rambam talks about how the Yom Tovim have to be declared in Israel. And if God forbid, it's an amazing Rambam, if God forbid there were no Jews living in Israel, you could not celebrate Pesach. And that's the beginning of Pesach. You look in the Torah, sanctify the calendar, but that had to be done only in the land of Israel. Kimitzion Teitzei Torah. It's an amazing idea. Discuss how the Amidah is the same on all the holidays. It's all the exact same. We just changed one word, Chag and we changed the korban because it's one kedushas. Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot is like one unit of holidays. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is separate, so it's not like the Torah Tamima claims that there's a mistake in our siddur that you're supposed to fill in instead of saying Hazmanim, the generic term, and it's time to fill in Chag HaMatzot, Chag Shabbat. The Rav did not like that inside of the Torah Tamima. Then we talked about Atabak Artanu. Did we choose God or God choose us? Of course, the answer is a little bit of both, but we sort of emphasize, and that's what our tefillah emphasizes. You chose us. We didn't choose you. And we see it. God needed, that's why the first 11 chapters in Bereshit, and it says God chose us because we're not a big nation. He does love us, but it could be the original choosing wasn't based on love. It was based on need. And then from that need, and because Avram was so great, and Chesed, and Staka, Mishpat, that need turned into love. And obviously it's both. And when God chose us really, really twice. He chose us with Avram, and he chose us again at Har Sinai. That's really two different choosings of the Jewish people. And that concept of it's in Dvarim, as we're about to enter the land of Israel. Moshe says, don't intermarry. Don't marry all those nations that are going to be there. Because obviously, if religion is important, husband and wife have to be in the same religion. That's obvious. So therefore, that's the notion. We talked about which mitzvah came before Mamad Har Sinai, what we're given only at Sinai, and then we talked about God's name, putting God's name upon us. Chilul Hashem, where God's name appears in the name of the Jewish people. That's how the Mepharshim explain it. It's really interesting. I never really thought of that. Right? Right? Upon us, Yisrael, and therefore our obligation is to do Kiddush Hashem and to sanctify God's name, and that's why we introduced the laning on Yom Tov. And the Torah put right before it talks about the Yom Tovim and Emor, it puts in Kiddush Hashem. What Debbie mentioned at the beginning of the Shir Zeker L'Maseh Bereshit. Just let me add a point. So in the I saw one of the first points this out. Magen Avot, Bivero, Makayim Tim, Lakadosh, Enkamu. Nech Lamo, Yom Shabbat Kocho, Zecher L'Maseh Bereshit. We don't mention Egypt. We only mention Mitzrayim. When we come to Kiddush, we mention both Zecher L'Yetzi Mitzrayim and Zecher L'Maseh Bereshit. And when we talk about Yom Tov, we only mention Batitein Lanu. That's the next paragraph. That's why I didn't quite get there. I was hoping to. We don't say Zecher L'Maseh Bereshit. So it explains fundamentally Shabbat is about on creation. Of course, added on were the many layers, as I said. But Mitzrayim is in other words, it's very important, but that's not the fundamental nature of Shabbat. The fundamental nature of Shabbat is to recognize God's creation. So on Magen Avot, we only say Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit. Kiddush already, we're adding in, we're sanctifying, we're adding in that second element. But on Yom Tov has nothing to do with creation. Yom Tov is only about history. So therefore we say, Zecher L'Yitzim Mitzrayim, only Zecher L'Yitzim Mitzrayim. So that's, I don't know if Debbie, that answers your point at all. But anyways, okay. And
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, let me see if there are any questions here. And then people are busy. I hope you're not too busy today. No. Question now whether is not when we chose Hashem, but when we choose to follow Hashem. Yeah, no other God. Listen, for us, it's don't follow this God, that God. That's not the challenge of our generation. Hasn't been for a long time. It's to follow, unless you say other gods are power and money and kavod, all those things. But we don't really have the problem with the Torah is talking about follow other gods. The other problem, people aren't interested in Judaism. It's not because Christianity is competing with Judaism or Islam. You don't find so many Jews converting to other, that there were times in history that was common. That was quite common, not just because it was forced or it was to get whatever it was. But we don't have people like that, right? So that's why a lot of the Torah, the way it describes it, we have to relate it to us in a different way. Not that, but we understand that intermarriage. It's not that when we intermarry we're going to convert. That's not what happens. We intermarry, we don't observe anything. Or true others today, that's not true either. That's why I said. That's why Rav Schechter can say the most important person to invite your seders, your intermarried cousin, because today many Jews intermarry in our law, but others, not so few, they still have a Pesach seder. They may even fast and convert. I teach in chat. It's a little bit of an issue. And I don't know what the answer is. I speak chat. I have kids I teach who are not halakhically Jewish. I don't know what to do about it exactly. And they're, the father's Jewish. Either the mother didn't convert at all, or she had a reformed version. But they're like they spend $25,000 a year to send their kids to day school. Like they consider themselves, and they go to Jewish camps and they have a Pesach Seder. So it's a little bit, I don't know, but they're not Jewish, like halachically. That's why I'm not getting the whole issue. That's for a whole other topic. Zeri Yisrael. They're not, I don't consider them goyim. Like there's this middle category. That's what's the controversy now in Israel. Is there such a middle category, where you can have somebody who's not Jewish but isn't like totally not Jewish. He's Zeri Yisrael, as we say, like all the Russian. That's one of the Atarim to be lenient on conversions. Rabbi Shalom, a whole book written about that. A lot of people have this concept. You cannot say that somebody has a Jewish father and a non-Jewish mother is like a goy gomer, like a goy off the street. They're Zeri Yisrael. They have Jewish seed in them, and therefore we have to be warm and outreach to them. But that's we need a lot more to discuss that. Okay, anyways, but so the Torah's description of intermarriage is not exactly the same reason. Of course, intermarriage is a terrible thing, but it's different. And then we haven't, it would be awful. Anybody who sat Shiva because somebody intermarried, that would be terrible today to sit Shiva. We don't do that. It would be, anyways, okay. The decision to go on the calf is not the last time we strayed. Of course, we stray all the time. Yeah. Of course. Maybe Hashem, they're all models. The Torah is just giving us template. And it's true. The golden calf can be interpreted, the money, all kinds of different ways. Maybe Hashem's loves in a special way because more than other nations, we continue. Yeah. And that's really the Yitz Greenberg idea. Yitz Greenberg takes it to an extreme. Rabbi Yitz Greenberger, says that after the Holocaust, anybody who remains a Jew is like unbelievable. It's true. I say, I tell my Darwin, we proved Darwin. Who survived as Jews? Only the fittest. Most people fell by the wayside and weren't up to what it took. It's not only persecution that lowered our numbers. Of course, that had a big impact. But believe me, 1391, more than half the rabbis in Spain converted. And the only reason you heard about the Abarbanel is because he didn't take up the offer of Ferdinand and Isabella to stay in Spain. Had he done that, he would have been written a Jewish, like hundreds of other rabbis were. 100 years earlier, people converted left and right all the time. And it was, So those who remain Jewish, amazing, despite everything. Yitz Greenberg goes so far to say that the covenant today is a voluntary covenant. No, some people, it's a very, very problematic to say such an idea. But his idea was that God broke his promise, and we, the Jewish people, love God so much that we renewed our covenant with God of the Holocaust. I think, but so God should love us more. That's what this is very like Reb Levi is a partition. Jews are amazing people. Even that's what I'm telling you. They intermarry, but they spend all this money on Jewish education. What amazing people they are. We Jews are amazing. Look at all the wonderful things we do. We can look at our sins. We're going to read tomorrow the aftermath of Cheda Egel. That's our laning tomorrow. But we also have to look at the greatness of the Jewish people. We're wonderful people. We are, and we do so many wonderful things. Okay. Maybe we don't focus on the Deen aspect of Yom Tov, but they are agriculture. And in Galus, we were no longer, yeah, that's very true. We totally ignore the agriculture, 100%. We don't focus on it. Yeah, because your agriculture, right. Okay, yeah, I agree with that. That's a sociological explanation. I don't think that's like a halakhic explanation, but that is true. Okay, Chag Sameach. Okay, thank you. Okay, the Rav accepted kids of my were not. Oh, really? I did not know that. He really did. Wow, that's interesting. Did they try and convert them?
That I don't know, but I read somewhere that if people raise the objection that the mother wasn't Jewish, he said, but we have to, if they want to send to a Jewish school, we have to accept them.
Right. Listen, in my grade 12 class now, says we're nearing the end of the year already. So they're for their final product, they have to interview somebody. I love it. The kids like it too very much. So they interview somebody in front of the whole class. And I don't want to say the name of the person, but they interviewed a chashuv rabbi of a shul, a big Talmud Chacham, and they asked him this question about what the accepting, and he said it was a very tough question, and he said he would be more willing, he's more open. He wasn't giving a rule, but he's more open to accepting them in a yeshiva. But in a school where many of the kids are not religious, it's a greater problem because the kid meets his girlfriend. And I mean, Zach Hyman met his girlfriend. Zach Hyman just scored a hat trick on Monday night. I shouldn't say that. Of the Edmonton Oilers, had 54 goals, I think, this year. First, graduate of Chat. The playoffs in the Seder. He's proudly Jewish, by the way. He is involved in but he's not going to miss the hockey game. So instead of the 4 cups of wine, he had 3 goals. Okay, but what can you do? So he met his wife at Chat. Very nice. But what if he meets his Chad wife and the mother's not Jewish? It's not so simple. Now, most kids are Jewish. I don't want to get this impression like every other kid is like that. But I don't know what the numbers are, but it's more than 2. There are 1,328 kids in Chad in 4th grades. It's, so it's in a yeshiva, it's much going to less. But I find that interesting because in Maimonides, I'm sure many of the kids were not observant. And I think, yeah, I did not know the Rav did. I think Rav Moshe has a tshuva. You're not allowed to accept it. But I don't know that Rav Moshe would say that if he were alive today. It's a different world. That's why halacha kibatra. You can't just read a tshuva of Rav Moshe written 50, 60 years ago when intermarriage was at 15% and people thought it was terrible. And to a society today, it's so added, reality's changed. But I find that very fascinating that the Rav accepted kids of Madis who are not technically Jewish. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Rabbi Turin, Asher Turin also said that the Rav accepted.
Yeah, I believe it. It's not shocking. There's a good reason, and maybe they'll convert because and obviously the Rav is saying what I said. Obviously, they're not totally not Jews. It's not like some kid, from Indonesia immigrated to Canada, and I hear Chat's a good school, good academic standards. I'm going to send my kid. Like that's not what we're talking about. It's very different. So it's a huge issue because there are 400,000 of them in Israel. I mean, where it's a real, listen, there are solutions, but it takes political will. I don't want to get into the part of the solution because then I'll have to start politics and all these, things I don't want to talk about, but at least not on a public share like this. But there are solutions. We mentioned there are solutions, but it takes a little bit of halakhic courage. I would say that a little bit of, not just, there are more than one source. Anyway, okay. But I want to wish everybody a Chag Sameach. Next week we'll have some of our shir. I don't remember exactly. I mean, it's still Yom Tov Monday, Tuesday. We'll have our partial shir. Next week we'll go back to the Siddur. The following week, I'm excited to let you know Chaim Angel is going to be starting a series. He's been teaching YU for many years, really an expert in Tanakh. We have a few things coming up, so we'll keep you posted. But I want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. There's no Rabbi Lichtag. Rabbi Lichtag was actually willing to give a shiur on Sunday and not do it earlier. Yom Tov, I said, you know what, we won't do. But anyway, so please God, we'll see you next week. Want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom, a Chag Sameach. Should be meaningful and inspirational, and we should have a Yeshua.
Peaceful.
This was a different Pesach. I don't know what people did differently at the Seder this year. I mean, we read, we didn't do so much. We read the Tefillah, Rabbi Lau. We did that these for the hostages. We always do something for the Holocaust. That we always do. We did Yael Ziegler's Diana one night. You know that she did. That was interesting. Many people asked me for that. Okay, everybody. Shabbat Shalom and Chag
Shabbat
Sameach.
Shalom. Thank you.
Okay. Be well.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hey,
Marty, how you
thank
doing? Thank you. You were quiet today. You didn't have any questions.
Yeah, I won, but they won. But I've never understood that if we make Yom Tov, we were determined when Yom Tov. During the war in Shanghai, why they had to celebrate two days Yom Kippur.
Oh, what you mean? They didn't have to. I mean, Mark, Dr. Shmir talked about when the Mir Yeshiva went to Shanghai, there's a question of the international dateline. So they sent the question to Israel. This is a complicated question. People didn't translate. The Gemara doesn't know from international datelines. So they sent this shot to Israel, and all the rabbis passed it one way, and the Chazon Ish said the opposite. So most people just followed what everybody said, and some people, in yeshiva people, they were machmir. So my understanding is there were people, I don't know if they fasted 48 hours, they ate in, I don't know exactly what, but yeah, they fasted 48 hours, and some on Shabbos, they kept Shabbos, at least on a Doraita level on Sunday, but that's not normal. That's not how you rule for people. Yechidei Skula, people there is a notion that one wants to be extra meticulous or extra careful and worry about other views. But that's not for me and you. Maybe it's for you. It's not for me. It depends what. That's one thing that I learned from Rav Schachter like 5,000 times. He told us he would quote some Qumrah or something. The Mishnah where it says this. Am I going to put together? And if people would ask him, should we keep that Qumrah? He would say, I don't know. What's up to you? What else are you doing in your life? What are do you pay all your taxes? If you don't pay all your taxes, don't worry about the Chumrah of Gebrooks on Pesach. Like you put things normal. Like you have to, and by the way, I don't want to, and now the class is over, so I can be more open, but whatever. No, that was one of the reasons he has such a strong opposition to a lot of the women's innovation. His reading of it, I'm not right, I'm just telling you what he said 40 years ago. Okay, we're going back a long time. So he said that, a lot of these women who want all these innovations, they don't keep many of the basic mitzvot that are obligatory on women. First, let them daven every day, twice a day, shachrit and mincha every day, and then we can talk about a women's prayer group on Shabbat. I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I'm just saying, that was his sort of attitude that everything has to be done. Seder.
If you go back, I think about 50 years, there's some Jewish newspaper at the University of Toronto that some crazy guy wrote the same thing in an article. That crazy guy is talking right now.
Oh, so me? I wrote an article. You're saying
No, me.
You wrote an article in the Canadian News. I'm saying
There was a paper that existed the UFC for a year. And
Oh, and you see,
okay.
Yeah, listen. These questions are not just halakhic questions. They have to take into a lot of factors into consideration. That's why we've spoken many times. We've done away with the Mara Atra, which is not good. It could very well be that a woman's prayer group, or even a partnership meeting, maybe that's already a little bit more radical. But even so, could be it's appropriate in certain places. Maybe 95% of the places not appropriate. But you know what? Maybe it is appropriate in 10% of shul. We can't have this. We have today like one halakha prayer because the Gadol says this. That's not the way halakha is supposed to work. Every community is different.
Look, for many years, I don't know if he's still, but Marty Auction used to be the most that I felt the
Right. Marty Lecture ran the partnership meeting in Toronto, and you can say that it's wrong. You can say you don't agree with it, and it's not really right. But there's a mali smoke. I mean, to say that I don't want to get into the whole thing now, but to say that a woman can have an aliyah, it's not such a wild thing. The Gemara says it black and white. We don't do it because of Kodet Tzibur. So today, the Tzibur doesn't mind. The Tzibur says we want them to have an aliyah. So maybe that's allowed. So you can argue that one way or another, but that argument is a heretic saying that.
I was gonna tell you that when the partnership meeting came out, I left Toronto, but I remember there were a couple times that it came near me at Lincoln and Bassett, and I went to a couple times.
At the partnership meeting,
And I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, I once went to a partnership meeting once because I was invited to a bat mitzvah, and I sort of debated, am I going to dive in at another minyan? They said, this, don't tell anybody. This is like for the people who stay extra long, whatever. So I really debated, should I dive in first? I was, and I decided, no, I'm just going to dive in at the partnership minyan, which is what I did. And the truth of the matter, I found it very, very, very moving. It was quieter than my shul. You didn't hear a word. That's another halakhic problem. People talking in shul like that, they don't get excited about. But it was perfectly quiet. It was very moving. It was very nice. It's whatever. They have the mechitza. It was a full day. Yeah, so woman had aliyah. Actually, davened twice. Actually, two bar mitzvahs I was invited to that I davened. No, one of them they just did for laning. Whatever they did, whatever family members. I felt it's more important to go and rely on those opinions. Okay, and I have no problem. Whatever. If somebody wants to do it and it makes them happy, and I don't think they should be thrown out of Orthodoxy. I guess I'm from the Big Ten school. That we should the people we can throw out maybe are the business cheats. If you want to throw anybody out, don't have to throw out. Anyways, okay, not for now. It's late. I gotta go shopping and still stuff to get for Shabbos. Thank God our kids are all here, Baruch Hashem, which is nice. Special treat for us. So, anyways, okay. Chag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you soon. Hopefully. Bye bye.
Excellent.